Welcome if you're just joining us. This is the France 24 debate. We're on day one of talks in Geneva between Iranian negotiators and the P5+1, the nations of the UN Security Council, plus Germany, I believe, is the other one, or is it the European Union?
Yes,
I never
it's Germany.
forget. It is Germany. Yes, that's right. We're talking about it with Milad JOKAR, analyst, Iranian, who you can read in the Huffington Post, most notably. Former French ambassador to Tehran, François Picard. Robert ZARATE of the Foreign Policy Initiative is with us from Washington. And Didier CHAUDET of the Institute for Prospective and Security Studies in Europe. Welcome back to all of you. We've been talking in part one whether or not to uncork the champagne. Not yet, obviously, over these negotiations. No one is saying that. Iranian investors, though, they believe the Tehran stock market has soared in the past month on hopes there'll be a deal. But the stock market may be going up. But look at some of the other indicators. In the red, GDP. It's flat this year after a 5.4% contraction. Youth unemployment skyrocketing. Inflation, even worse. Officially, it's 40%. Staple items like rice up 70%, grain nearly 80%. And with currency reserves drying up, the government this month foregoing, for many, a monthly subsidy equivalent to about $18 for most Iranians. The clock is ticking then for Rouhani. If he's not able to pay out this subsidy, how long before the people fall out of love with him?
Well, after every election, the clock is ticking, and there's a short term to have confidence from the population. So it's kind of like Roosevelt's New Deal. He had his first 100 days. We have to see what Rouhani is capable to do with his new administration to curb these issues and youth unemployment and also the economic problems in Iran. But it's difficult to measure how it is possible to be done because the Iranian structure and systems, like for the employment, is kind of different. You cannot, because of sanctions, have credit letters for businesses, and many businesses.
Banks aren't lending money.
They're not. Yeah, absolutely, and this is a real problem, and it creates a lot of inflations and also unemployment because it's too risky for businessmen inside of Iran. So there is, on one hand, Rouhani's economic plan, and on the other hand, lifting of sanctions. That is really important.
Didier CHAUDET, the last time you were in Tehran, did you see those sanctions bite?
Of course, it has an impact on the everyday man and woman, on the average person. And the irony of it, if it is targeting first and foremost people who are from the middle class, people who will be less conservative, who will be eager to have some changes in the country. These are the ones suffering from the sanctions. So basically, we are in a situation right now when the sanctions are crippling the economy, targeting all the Iranians and making nationalism stronger. Chauvinism and anti-Americanism to some extent, and it is targeting people who could help the regime change in a gentle way. So basically, these sanctions can be seen as counterproductive. Again, the main issue here is that from an American point of view, it is seen as helping them pushing the Iranians toward negotiation on something that is important from a European and American point of view, but that is not taking into account that the nuclear issue is not the only issue. We should talk about Middle Eastern stability in South Asia, in Afghanistan in particular. You will not have peace in Afghanistan without Iran. And we are just not thinking about that. We are thinking just through the approach of the nuclear issue, and I think it's a mistake.
François NICOULLAUD?
I don't agree entirely on this. I believe that the nuclear file is the key to the solution of the other problems. I believe if one finds a solution, a satisfactory solution on this nuclear file, it will help the solution of perhaps the Syrian crisis, the situation in Iraq, and so on. We could create a kind of virtuous circle, a virtuous momentum in the region. This is my hope, at least. And strangely enough, this nuclear file is the easiest to solve because the parameters are well known. Everybody knows what is necessary to reach a compromise. Everybody knows it. Now it's a matter of political will. And this is why the next moments are so important.
Robert Zarate, do you agree that it's much easier to sort out Iran's nuclear program than it is, say, Syria?
I think all those problems are complicated, and I agree with the other guests that we need to look at the totality of the picture. And something that has not been discussed is that Iran is a state sponsor of terror, so designated by the U.S. State Department since 1984. The Islamic Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps is in many countries spreading instability, Syria most notably, and as also the Iranian government has also sent Hezbollah, a terrorist proxy, into Syria to further destabilize that region and support the Assad regime. So,
right, but,
this idea that
so far, Robert, Iran has not been invited to talks on Syria. Should they be invited?
I'm skeptical about doing that. It's akin to inviting an arsonist to join the fire department. I think Iran is part of the problem. This is a situation
Even though they're the main sponsor of the Assad government.
I think we should first and foremost deal with the Assad regime and work with our allies and partners in the region to further pressure the Assad regime to tamp down the violence and actually negotiate in good faith towards a post-Assad Syria.
Well, we have seen French President François Hollande, who said recently that Iran would be welcome to talks on Geneva too for the Syrian crisis. But also, I believe that as a regional actor and main ally of Bashar al-Assad, it has to be on the table if we want to stabilize this Syrian crisis. But also, we should not mix the two agendas, the two issues. The nuclear issue has to be settled, as His Excellency François NICOULLAUD said, that the nuclear issue could be the key to solving regional issues. Once you have less tensions with Iran, then you could solve different issues. It is simply not possible today to have emptiness, to have almost nothing between Istanbul to New Delhi and also from Russia to Addis Ababa.
All right, and of course there's the question we've broached on, but we need to perhaps tackle head on, which is, does Hassan Rouhani's team have a complete green light from Iran's supreme leader? Ayatollah Khamenei, at about some 10 days ago, said there were nuances in his support for Rouhani's decision to become the first Iranian president to chat on the telephone to his U.S. counterpart since the 1979 revolution.
We
support the government's diplomatic movements and place importance on diplomatic efforts. And we support what was in this last trip. Of course, in our opinion, some of what occurred in the New York trip was not proper. While we are optimistic about our government's diplomatic staff, we are pessimistic about the Americans.
He goes on to say that the U.S. government's not trustworthy, it breaks promises, and controlled by and seeks to serve the interests of, quote, Zionists. What does he mean when he says some of what occurred in the New York trip was not proper?
Well, we have to look at this picture that in Iran it is also as difficult as in the West or Washington to deal with domestic affairs. So on the one hand, he said that he's confident about his team and on the nuclear issue, but on the other hand, he said that he has doubts regarding the issues of such negotiations. So at the end of the day, he will have a comfortable position, because if there is a success in the negotiations, then Ayatollah Khamenei will be, he would have said that it's okay, we are able to have a deal. But if it fails, then he can say, well, we have told you so. So at the end of the day, he kind of protects himself because he has the last word. But what is important today is to see that the Americans and the P5+1 seems to consider that he has this last word, and it's a positive word for negotiations.
Ambassador?
No, it's true. I mean, Khamenei gave a gentle tap on the head of Rouhani, reminding him that he's the boss. He's the one who fixes the rule. And at the same time, if he has criticized the famous telephone call, probably because people were a bit disappointed by the Americans' reaction, what Obama said a few hours after that, after this very nice conversation. Obama reminded that all options are on the table, for instance, which is a bit threatening for Iran. This is something they don't like. And in Iran, I mean, people have not seen the immediate result in the way, expressing oneself in the American language. They were a bit disappointed. And this is why Khamenei repeats what he has often said: we cannot trust the Americans. They say one thing one day, and the other day they say another thing.
All right, so there were no immediate results, and that disappointed some. On Twitter, Michael says, despite the talks, the U.S. will not end sanctions and will continue monitoring Iran's nuclear production. Recently, a newspaper headline, and this is interesting, from conservative daily Kayhan, was enough to give the foreign minister a backache. Rouhani's phone chat with Obama and my lengthy meeting with Kerry were inappropriate, screamed a headline, quoting leaks from a meeting. Well, Foreign Minister Javad Zarif took to Facebook to rectify. He said it's interesting that those who claim to support the guardianship of the jurist are moving ahead of the supreme leader. While it was a bitter day, it was educational. I learned that everything I say has to be open because the market for abuse is very hot. So already there an example of jousting, it seems, between moderates and hardliners. And then there's the debate over whether or not to keep chanting death to the United States at rallies. One news agency has been reporting that hardliners chanting at a weekend speech by former President Rafsanjani, close to Rouhani, who is for dropping the chant. On that score, mark November 4th on your calendar, the anniversary of the storming of the U.S. Embassy. Are they going to drop that chant or not?
Well, this is a chant that is all about the chant. It's just few words that reflects a longer and deeper reflections. And for the basis of the Islamic Revolution, it was based on anti-Americanism from the 1953 coup to then.
So what you're saying is, on November 4th, we will be hearing "Death to the United States."
Yeah, I'm afraid. Yeah, it doesn't really help. It's like hearing from on the one hand, "Down with America," and on the other hand, this Iran is the axis of evil from two religious country. Like comparison with the evil, that's very tough. But after 34 years of mistrust. No, one phone call will not be enough to drop that chant every Friday.
With all due respect, if they are chanting death to America or not is not important. What is important is to create links between Iran and the US, and it will take time. And again, it will all be a question of political will. It has been said several times that we believe that the nuclear issue will unblock things or not is a different issue. The main issue is political will. The problem is that for the last 2 decades, we didn't see a lot of political will in the two sides. And the thing is, I mean, again, I think it is the strongest part who can create a momentum for political will. Remember Nixon towards Mao in the 1970s. It took time, into nearly a decade, but the US has been talking to Mao's China, a regime that could have been defined as totalitarian. And still they have been able to talk, they have been able to create diplomatic links. And maybe the China that we see today is a result of those links, even if at first the regime was not very interesting to look at from a human rights point of view.
All right, you're saying that in the end, whether or not people chant death to America is not that important. Robert Zarate, let me ask you though, when you hear former President Rafsanjani weighing in so openly as he has, saying, look, let's stop doing that because it's counterproductive. What are your thoughts?
It's a welcome thing to hear, but it's just a data point among many other data points that point the other direction. I mean, if you look at the composition of Ali Khamenei's national security team, two figures to keep an eye on are on his National Security Council, and one is Ali Shamkhani, a former IRGC hardliner, and Ali
Explain to
Husseini
us what the
Tash, who's
IRGC
also.
is.
Yeah, sure. They're sort of the vanguard of the Iranian Revolution. They're a paramilitary force that is essentially the ideological Praetorian Guard of the Iranian Revolution, and they have very powerful influence over the Iranian economy and also over governance.
Ambassador NICOULLAUD, that's one of the main preoccupations of people, is that whatever steps you may make, that the leadership will be beholden to these groups that were paramilitary groups, but have now got business interests and have absolutely no stake in opening up the system.
Well, the world of the Pasdaran is a big world, and there are many kinds of Pasdaran. There are people of the hierarchy, the military hierarchy, which stands staunchly behind the leader, the supreme leader, which defends the ideals of the revolution. But you have also all these Pasdaran who have been introduced, put at the head of various companies, trusts, and so on. And they're in charge of large chunks of the economy today. But these people, being in charge, thus in charge, they want to succeed. They want the enterprise, the endeavor to succeed. And for this, they realize that they need the end of sanctions. So within the world
They
of
want
the
to succeed,
Pasdaran,
or can we see?
kinds
They want to succeed, or can we see Iran get bogged down like in Egypt, where the military has its finger in lots of economic pies, and what you get is this sort of bureaucratic, mercantile economy that doesn't really take off?
No, it's still something else. I remember a few years ago, Hillary Clinton was repeating that Iran was changing, was going to in the direction of a military dictatorship. This did not happen. This is not the Iranian style. I mean, with all its defects, Iran has a constitution that people respect more or less, and so on. And I don't think the Pasdaran are eager to take the power, to eliminate the supreme leader, to take the power in Iran. It's still something else. They're loyal to the revolution, they're loyal to the constitution, of course, their own way.
And also the Sepah Pasdaran, the Islamic Revolutionary Guards, well, they have been warned by Khamenei and Rouhani not to intervene in political affairs in Iran recently. Like that was last month that both the Iran president and the supreme leader said that not to intervene in political affairs. And we were talking about Egypt as well, and it is interesting to see the importance also and the way Iranians in Iran consider the Sepah Pasdaran, because if we look at the Middle East, Iran is the only stable country compared to other countries in the region, but its system is stable, and it is also in some way thanks to the Sepah Pasdaran, and that group was created after the revolution to protect the Islamic Republic, the Islamic Revolution from a coup d'etat, things that happened in Egypt. And in Egypt there was this revolution from the people, and then we have seen that the military intervened, and that was the end of the revolution. So I don't know how Egypt will be in few years. I'm, for now, unfortunately not very optimistic. But in Iran, there has been almost no act of terrorism inside Iran. The security apparatus is strong.
Right, but there was the uprisings of 2009, most notably, and a lot of people have a lot of
Absolutely.
misgivings about these revolutionary guards.
And I agree.
But
The decision making has to be done to protect the stability of the Islamic Republic. And unfortunately, when you had this, the reaction to this uprising, of course, that was a real issue in 2009.
And one which still perhaps leaves a bitter taste today. If we draw up a map for the region, Didier Chaudet has brought up the point. The question you might ask is, are the same old rivalries and alliances set to shift now? And Robert ZARATE, I wanted you to rebound perhaps off of something that Didier said, which is Iran's as when you think of its role in Afghanistan, in Syria, in Iraq, should Washington be engaging a lot more with Iran?
I think the issue is Washington has engaged with Iran. First of all, during the Iraq War, there were low-level, mid-level engagements with the Iranian regime. But I think I agree with a lot of the speakers here that the nuclear issue is at the very core. It threatens not just U.S. security, Israeli security, and the security of other friends and partners such as the Saudis. And until that situation is the nuclear file is really taken care of, I don't see a clear path ahead towards even more constructive relations.
Didier Chaudet?
This is where I will depart from my colleagues here and in Washington, is that it's again a question of political will. If we want to take care only of the atomic issue, of a nuclear issue, and say that because it is not taken care of, we don't look at anything else, then we will have a problem. It's true that maybe it is a bias that I have because I go to Afghanistan and Pakistan, but I have to say that on the ground, what matters also politically is to see Afghanistan stabilize, is to see Iraq stabilize, is to avoid the continuation of a bloodbath in Syria. And indeed, it is a question of choice. For the people on the ground, what matters is their stability and to avoid tensions in the region more than the nuclear issue. The nuclear issue is an international one that is touching the West, the nuclear group, broadly speaking, the guys who already have nuclear weapons, and Iran as a middle-range power in the Middle East. So it is a question of ego, it is a question of power at the international level. But let's not forget the other issues and let's try to deal with them before it will be too late. Otherwise, we'll have to go back to Afghanistan and we'll see a new Somalia appear in Syria, which is not good for the Europeans, at least.
A cautionary tale from Didier Chaudet. I want to thank you. I want to thank François NICOULLAUD, Milad, JOKAR. I also want to thank as well Robert ZARATE for joining us here in the France 24 debate. Before we say goodbye to the panel, though, let's say hello to James Creedon. How are you, sir?
Evening, François.
It's time for our Media Watch segment.
That's right. So just to look at how this story has been playing out in the global media, Le Monde has quite helpfully done a press review of the Iranian media, speaking better Farsi than I do. And some of the reactions there, it's obviously front page news in all of the major Iranian newspapers today. That one, Mardom Salari, which is a reformist paper, saying the people are expecting concrete results from the Geneva negotiations. Further on, a photo on the front page of the foreign minister, Mohammed Javad Zarif, and that's in Save Ektasad. I hope that's not completely mangled in terms of the pronunciation. That's a business daily, and they're pointing out there that the steps being taken by the Iranian team to shorten the period of negotiations is a sign of the optimism of the Iranian team going in, that to arrive at the end of those talks in Geneva quickly and indeed a lifting of the sanctions.
So a definite spectrum, though, in terms of the views.
That's right. A degree of optimism, also a degree of reflecting of the public desire for this deadlock to be broken, basically. One other opinion piece that was mentioned by Le Monde, Mohammed, if I could get this right, Youssef Moulay, he's a professor of international law, and he said, look, this isn't to support diplomatic negotiations. It's not about winning or losing. It's about finding some kind of compromise or a consensus. And the very fact that we're around the negotiation table is a huge step forward. So he's tempering people who are viewing this as a sort of a winner-loser type dynamic. So that's just a quick look at how that's playing out in the Iranian press through the eyes of Le Monde. Foreign policy, obviously the world's media talking about this generally. Just one little detail from a foreign policy article. Hawks in Israel and Washington have been cautioning against the optimism about Hassan Rouhani, Iran's new prime minister. Many saying that he's a wolf in sheep's clothing, that indeed warning that the Iranian regime may agree to cosmetic changes to its nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief. So that's, I suppose, the cautious note being struck by some in the US or the Israeli press. Another reflection of that here in Haaretz. Half measures with Iran will mean more isolation for Israel. So I suppose that worry that if a compromise solution is reached, but with the 5+1, 5 permanent security members, etc., that for Israel, who would stick to a more hardline position, that could mean more isolation for Israel. And a headline in Haaretz as well, reflecting Netanyahu's quite tough stance on this. Israel has learned never to rule out a preemptive strike, he has said recently. So just one or two other items on this around social media, etc. François, this is on French social media. Is this a sort of a cosmetic change this cartoon seems to be suggesting? So a bomb is a bomb is a bomb, according to that cartoon.
Iran changes its image.
That's right. You can put a smiley face on it, but it remains a bomb is, I think, what they're making out there. Just as we're talking about Israel, that bizarre detail, I don't know if you saw this, Benjamin Netanyahu's Twitter account following a Persian sort of erotic Twitter account in the last 24, 48 hours. A lot of people saying that it just couldn't be true. It must be some sort of a hacking attempt just ahead of these talks starting in Geneva.
I'm counting on James Creedon to investigate. I want to thank you. I want to thank our panel, and thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.